All right, welcome back to our conference preview special podcast. We are on to the Pac-12. We're heading out west. We're going to talk all things Pac-12. We're going to talk, Oregon. We're going to talk the LA schools. We're going to talk possible realignment, the alleged alliance with the Big Ten and the ACC. And we're more than, and we've got my man from the West Coast, Matt Zemek, back with us. He's the editor of Trojan Wire. He covers all things USC athletics, and obviously it's football time of the year. So welcome back to the podcast, Matt.
Jason, thanks for having me. It's always fun to come on.
All right, awesome. Less than 2 weeks to go till we kick it off. All right, let's get right into it. Talk to me about this alleged alliance between the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the ACC. Tell me what you know about it, and kind of what do you think the pros and cons are from the Pac-12 perspective.
So it seems as though this is not really about scheduling games. And that's the main thing to emphasize. Not about scheduling games. It's more about having votes in the room. And this is like a college sports governance issue to be able to vote down what the SEC wants to do.
Right.
That's really the main thing. And so being able to put the brakes on this 12-team playoff plan, which really it's a surprise to me. I mean, I can certainly see the politics of it, that the SEC getting 5 at-large teams in, kind of a strong arm move, and the working group from June, and here's an interesting point, Jason. Larry Scott was speaking on behalf of the Pac-12 in June. Even though George Kliavkoff was there, Scott was still speaking, even though he was out the door. And even though this playoff plan was not going to be during Scott's tenure, Scott was still speaking. And that struck me as very odd at the time. And you'll notice that the Big Ten and also the ACC have very new conference commissioners. So those three new commissioners, it's like, hey, we're the new guys on the block. We're going to assert ourselves. We're going to show right away that we're not going to be kicked around. And it's instructive that Bob Bowlesby of the Big 12 is in this in-between place because he's not the SEC, but he's not a young pup who's new to this. Yeah. So like they're saying, Bob, you're past due, you're out of date, you're obsolete. But like the 3 young Power 5 commissioners have clearly said, we need to form our power circle, and we all band together, 3 of us, not just 2, we have enough votes to vote down the SEC and any coalition partners the SEC might be able to get in terms of votes in the room. It feels like Congress, but that really seems to be the play. And so this, again, the surprising part is that I thought, we'd have a playoff in 2023. It was going to be fast tracked. Like you're not going to be able to get out of this. But maybe now that's going to happen. But the surprising thing is simply that these athletic departments, they need the money, so they need that money sooner rather than later. So does the Pac-12 really want to delay a 12-team playoff until 2026? It can use that playoff cash. Right. If we stay at 4 playoff teams through 2025 and the 12-year playoff deal that we're currently on, Pac-12 is not going to get that money. I mean, maybe 1 year, but not most of those years. So that's the real mystery here is there a way for the Pac-12, Big Ten, and ACC to redo the 12-team playoff plan, but still push it through? Maybe, but right now it really seems to be the play that they want to postpone the playoff and they want to have Fox, because Fox, televises Pac-12 and Big Ten games. The ACC, of course, is an ESPN conference, so that's kind of a tricky political thing all its own over there on an island. But the Pac-12 and Big Ten in particular, they really seem to want to get it to where Fox is potentially the carrier of the playoff down the line. But so that and not starting the playoff in 2023. That's really the head-scratching element of this because they need the money, and the Pac-12 needs those playoff appearances and playoff games. This works against that. So that's really what I'm interested in terms of what's next in this process. But they clearly do want to put the brakes on the SEC getting 5 at-large bids in the playoff, which was the whole reason for Oklahoma and Texas to be there. And that's the complicating factor, that you have a 4-team playoff with Oklahoma and Texas in the SEC, well, then Oklahoma's really screwed, because Oklahoma made the move because it knew it would be able to get playoff access, no problem, in a 12-team field. But now, if that gets blown up, Oklahoma's going to have Oklahoma's still going to make some money, but it's going to lose prestige because it won't be in the playoff because Alabama is going to muscle the Sooners out of that spot most years.
Yeah, and I definitely see. I think in the end, I think the playoff will stay at 8, 10 to 12 teams, probably closer to 12. And I think Fox and ESPN will split those games, those playoff package games. There'll be a way to, again, you want to feed both entities since they're so they contribute so much revenue. They're going to feed both of those entities in these playoff games. Hell, you got to think 12 teams is 11 playoff games. They're going to find a way to split those games up between Fox and ESPN.
That's a great point, Jason, because that way you still have a 12-team playoff, but you get Fox in on it. Yeah. And if you get Fox in on it, then that way the Pac-12 and Big Ten inventory under Fox has an incentive to continue to promote that, which definitely helps the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. Great point.
And I think you'll see some alliance football scheduling wise between the Pac-12 and the Big Ten because of the Rose Bowl alliance. So I think you've seen over the years, Oregon's played Ohio State and some of these other West Coast, UCLA, USC has played some of these Big Ten teams. I think you'll see some of that. And I think you'll see a Clemson go play a USC every once in a while, or a Clemson plays Oregon. I think that'd be a pretty cool cross-country rivalry, not rivalry, but interleague game that you could see from time to time.
Very possibly, since Las Vegas is going to be most likely the new Pac-12 headquarters in a few years. I mean, they're in San Francisco right now, but it's well known that the rent that Larry Scott racked up was very exorbitant. There's a lot of agreement throughout the athletic directors, presidents, and other stakeholders in the Pac-12 conference that we need to move somewhere else. Las Vegas is the natural place. It was going to host the Pac-12 championship game last year, but then the pandemic happened. Sure. So Las Vegas is, with the Raiders, brand new stadium, that's supposed to be the host of this year's Pac-12 title game. So everyone in the Pac-12 thinks Las Vegas is going to be the future host of Pac-12 HQ. And so you can put Las Vegas as the new neutral site locale for Labor Day weekend. You have the Chick-fil-A games in Atlanta, you have the games in Arlington, and then you can now add Las Vegas to the mix. And that is exactly how you would get a Clemson USC or Clemson Oregon,
Florida State,
ACC Pac-12 showcase. Exactly. That's how it all fits in.
What's funny is when you think about it, Las Vegas is going to be the hub of the Pac-12, yet they don't have a team in Las Vegas. There's not a Pac-12 team in Nevada, which is kind of funny,
Very, but the Pac-12 was smart to move the basketball tournament from Staples Center, where the event just wasn't having any buzz. Moving it to Las Vegas was an instant winner, and so that's going to be it. That proved to be the catalyst for more movement of Pac-12 activities of all kinds to Las Vegas.
Absolutely, it's funny, and again, same deal. It's funny how in the last 5 years, Las Vegas, when they didn't want no part of sporting events in Las Vegas because of the gambling element. Now it's the hub of all sporting events. That's the only place to go anywhere west of the Mississippi if you want to go to Las Vegas for your events.
Absolutely. And that's part of a broader reality, Jason, in which media companies are doing now deals with sports betting outlets because they're hemorrhaging cash and they need revenue to keep their operations afloat. So it's the new normal in the sports industry, not just college football, college sports, but sports journalism, everything. It's where we are now.
All right, we'll do one more off-field thing, then we'll hit the grass. Talk to me about the NIL impact out in the Pac-12. Has there been any substantial name, image, and likeness deals? Obviously probably a place like USC, the USC LA market's probably big, probably the Seattle market, but in the small towns in Pullman, Washington, and Palo Alto, are any of these kind of places generating deals for some of these kids?
I've heard of a few USC athletes getting deals. So, like Keaton Slovis, if you're a USC quarterback, like you're going to have that opportunity available to you whenever. Haven't heard a lot of the small town deals, like at a place such as Pullman Washington State, Corvallis, Oregon State. Haven't heard a lot of that the past few weeks, but, given everything else that's happened in college sports over the past few weeks since we last talked, that issue's kind of receded into the background. Not that it's ceased to be important, but just it's going to be kind of a slow burn.
Right.
Like it's more about, at this point, it's more about just the gradual evolution of it. Like there's no like big event people are waiting for. It's more about, just how is this thing going to evolve? Like that BYU deal,
right?
In terms of, covering walk-ons.
That's
like,
a great
that
deal.
was a very interesting plot twist. So like, what's going to be the next creative thing there? But really the big stuff is this Pac-12 alliance, and what's the chessboard in terms of realignment, the playoff. Like that's taken center stage in terms of off-field intrigues in college sports, including in the West.
And I think you'll see too with these NIL deals. I think you'll see once we get 3 or 4 games into the season and stars emerge at these different schools, where a guy like at Washington State, maybe the quarterback's having an unbelievable 3 or 4 game stretch, then the marketing people will come out, the opportunities will present themselves in some of these markets when they really establish who's gonna be the star player that particular year.
Completely agree. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be the first full-length college football season we've had in a pandemic. I mean, I know the SEC came pretty darn close to playing 12, but like this is the first quote-unquote normal college football season played in a pandemic. So there's going to be a great appetite for college football, unlike last year when people were just, derailed and ambushed by the pandemic. Sports TV ratings were down across all the sports. And it just felt really weird. Even, even the national title game, played in front of just a few thousand fans in Miami, it didn't really land the way that national championship game normally would.
Right.
This in many ways is the true welcome back moment for college football. Popularity, through the roof. People are really hungry for it. And so, several weeks into the season, the marketplace should definitely heat up, and it'll be very interesting to see.
And funny how Mr. Rolovich up at Washington State, his tune has changed a little bit now that they're mandating him to get vaccinated up at Washington State. It's funny how all of a sudden he'll get vaccinated now in order to keep his job.
Yes, but with that said, it's not as though he's saying, "Oh, I believe in the vaccine. I believe in science." It's like he's still saying, "Well, I'm just going to keep this to myself." And it's definitely not what a leader would say. And you're continuing to see. I don't know if you're paying attention to Washington State blogs and Pac-12 blogs. The calls for his firing or resignation are as loud as they were a month ago.
Okay.
So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. And the thing to emphasize with Washington State, since we're on the topic, if Washington State forfeits a game, he's gone. That's going to be the thing that gets him booted. So that's the ledge that Nick Rolovich is walking on. That's the thin sheet of ice he's walking on. If his team has to forfeit a game, boom, instant firing. That's definitely going to happen.
All right. So one new coach to the league, Jed Fish, the new head coach, Arizona. Just any thoughts about Jed? He's been all over the country at a bunch of different stops throughout the years. Is this a good hire for Arizona? Is this the kind of place he might stay for a few years if he has some moderate success? Or is he a job jumping kind of guy looking to jump to the next job if he were to have a little bit of success?
But this is his first big Power 5 head coaching opportunity. So I think he's there for at least 3 years.
Yeah.
I don't think there will be like a quick exit a la Lane Kiffin, spending 1 year at Tennessee before going to USC in 2010. He wants to build the program, and I think for his resume, he needs to build the program. I mean, Jed Fish is a solid coach, I would say, but he hasn't had a superstar turn. Michigan, UCLA, his other various stops. He hasn't built himself up as a rock star. In terms of just grading the hire, I think there were more attractive options out there for Arizona. My first choice would have been Willie Fritz of Tulane, a creative coach at a program which doesn't have a whole lot of resources. Give him the keys to a Power 5 job. There were other choices like Marcus Freeman the defensive coordinator formerly at Cincinnati, Brian Kelly of Notre Dame, snagged him. That was also a more attractive choice. So Fish, solid. I mean, he didn't do a bad job for Jim Harbaugh, but again, not great, not spectacular. Does he deserve a chance to lead a Power 5 program? I think Arizona's a good landing spot for him. You wouldn't want to give a prominent Power 5 job to him, but a lower end one such as Arizona, yeah, I think he deserves that. Let's see what he does. And he certainly improved everyone's mood. And it's not just the fact that he's not Kevin Sumlin, whose team quit in a rivalry game, losing 70-7, 63 points to Arizona State. It's not just the fact that he's not Kevin Sumlin. It's that he's opened up all his practices to the media.
Yeah.
He's run a program with maximum transparency. So the local writers, local fans, just people in and around the program, wow, they're all impressed. And it's worth praising him for that. Like, he's not one of these hyper paranoid coaches who thinks he always has something to hide. He's an open book. That's really great. Now let's see what he does on the field, though. That's what really counts.
And with all the Sean Miller stuff that was brewing, that's probably it's a safe hire. It's a low key hire. You're not bringing a guy who's had some other baggage other places. He's going to stay out of trouble most likely. So that's probably something they needed.
That's also precisely why his openness to the media is such a contrast and is so refreshing for the locals down in Tucson. That's also why, that is an emotionally fatigued program and community. They want some fresh air. They want someone who's wholesome and who's going to, at least go about things the right way. They obviously want the wins, but right now, just for this honeymoon period, it's like, someone who's just open and accountable, definitely the opposite of Sean Miller. So yeah, that's part of the mix. Good insight.
Let's go to Arizona State. I know you and I talked earlier in the summer about this recruiting investigation down there. I know they got rid of a coach, I believe, in the last couple of weeks, a couple of guys. Give us an update on the Herm Edwards situation at Arizona State.
Yeah, so 3 position coaches were either suspended or removed, so that they're the lower reaches of that coaching staff have been thinned out. So that means more work for the coordinators and the senior position coaches. So that that already places a strain on this coaching staff. But it does seem pretty clear at this point that the NCAA is not going to make a verdict before or during the season. It'll be after the season. So we'll see what the NCAA does, but assuming that nothing does happen before or during the season, well, here is Herm Edwards' big chance. He has, by all accounts,
a good team,
a veteran defense, a lot of starters back. He has a seasoned quarterback who is in a prove-it year. Jaden Daniels and lots of other quarterbacks in the Pac-12 last year, because of their shortened season, really didn't get to prove themselves.
Right.
Got just 4 to 6 games of playing time. So this is it for Jaden Daniels as well. If he puts together a huge year, he could probably rise to late first round, early second round, not top 15, but I think he might be able to get the back end of the first round if he puts together a great year. But yet, the thing with Herm Edwards is that his Arizona State teams are kind of like the Virginia basketball or the Bo Ryan Wisconsin teams, is that they play a conservative style. They emphasize defense so that they're never out of a game, but they're not going to blow you out. And so Arizona State, needs to find a way to either excel so much within Herm Edwards' system that it's winning every close game, or it needs to find a level of transcendence, a way to find
the
potency on offense. Yes, potency on offense to kind of go beyond Herm Edwards' preferred grinded out style. That's what I'm particularly skeptical of, because Arizona State's defense is going to be fine, but the offense, that's really the big question. Solid offensive line, quality running backs. It's the receivers. They do not have proven receivers. You've seen N'Keal Harry and Frank Darby and Brandon Ayuk go through the program in very recent years. So they don't have that big time speed burner on the edges. And so, Herm Edwards' team is a grinded out team, doesn't have a lot of imagination on offense. So Arizona State, can it get out of that mud? Can it get out of that 7-5, 8-4 range? Find a way to get to 10-2. I think that's really the goal that Sun Devil fans have for the program. Can we be a 10-win program? I mean, 9 would be pretty good. Herm hasn't won 9 yet. This is his 4th season. So 9 is the floor in terms of Arizona State fans' expectations here in Phoenix. But I think 10 is really the goal. And hopefully they'll hope that 10 comes with a win over USC. If they go 10-2 with a win over USC, probably means they're the Pac-12 South champions for the first time since 2013. They finally get back to the Pac-12 championship game. They get a chance to play their way into the Rose Bowl. That's what ASU fans are expecting from this season.
Where's that game with USC at? Is it in Tempe?
It's in Tempe. It's Sun Devil Stadium.
Yep. All right, let's get to the players on the field. Let's go. Probably the best offensive player is probably Keaton Slovis, as he's probably preseason player of the year on offense, or tell me if I'm wrong.
In the Pac-12, that's a great choice. The mystery with Keaton Slovis is that last year he had shoulder problems. He was kind of mum about it, but he admitted in the off season that, his body wasn't entirely right. I mean, he didn't go into details, and I guess that's fine. It's kind of much the way hockey teams say that a player had an upper body injury. They're not very specific about it. But Slovis did, albeit indirectly and well after the season, he said, I wasn't fully physically right. So if he's physically right, he could have a huge year, and that is really the best case scenario for USC, that Keaton Slovis is 100% fit. Right. He plays a lot more like the 2019 version of himself, which was pretty dynamic, but now he has 2 more years of experience within coordinator Graham Harrell's air raid system. Yep. So if he puts all the pieces together, Now, in terms of my particular choice for Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year, I would say it's Slovis's teammate, Drake London, the wide receiver. He is a freak. He makes all sorts of catches. He's going to be a beast in terms of winning 50-50 balls in the air, but he has speed as well. He can make plays all over the field, various kinds of routes. I mean, that's the one USC offensive player I'm 100% convinced will have a huge year. Like Slovis could struggle, and he might, throw some questionable passes. Well, Drake London's going to make him look good, right, on those plays. So that would actually be my choice. In Oregon and Washington, I see a lot of weaknesses on both offenses. Both quarterbacks, I'm not sold. Like Oregon's quarterback position has become surprisingly muddled. Right. It was widely expected that Anthony Brown, transfer from Boston College, who played with the program in Eugene last year, there was every expectation that he was going to firmly take hold of the job, but he hasn't been able to secure it, and Ty Thompson is nipping on his heels. So that concerns me if I'm an Oregon fan, especially with Ohio State there in week 2, that you haven't settled on a quarterback. Like, this isn't a case of the quarterbacks are dueling each other and it's just an amazing fight. It's more of the incumbent failing to secure the job. Right. It's a negative spin on that. So Oregon has to be worried. And with Washington, Dylan Morris, he's actually looked very good in camp, but we need to see it on the field in live games. And the thing with Washington, John Donovan, offensive coordinator, very meager credentials. And compared to Oregon's offensive coordinator, Joe Moorhead, who got the most out of Saquon Barkley, and Trace McSorley at Penn State, he's proven that he can max out as a play caller and a schemer. John Donovan has none of those chops. So for different, but considerably powerful reasons, there's reason to be skeptical about the offenses at both Oregon and Washington. So I'm very comfortable saying that Drake London is the best offensive player in the Pac-12 before heading into the season. Yeah, and defensively, I think everybody's eye is going to go to Oregon. Kayvon Thibodeau, the defensive end. He's a true junior. He's most likely coming out after this year unless something happens. He'll be probably a top 10 pick at worst. So I think he's going to get all the defensive attention in that league. Absolutely. Yep. It's a lot clearer on the defensive side. And one thing which helps Thibodeau become the obvious front runner for defensive player of the year is that the best defensive player on Washington Zion Tupuola-Fetui, their star pass rusher.
Oh, can you spell that? Can you spell that?
Tupuola, Tupuola, Fetui, Fetui.
Look at
I
you.
do my homework.
That a boy. That a boy.
Okay, but anyway, so Tupuola Fetui, he's going to be out at least 8 games,
Okay.
possibly 9 or 10. And that reality means that when Washington does play Oregon, Tupuola Fetui will be out. So the Huskies are going to have to find a way past the Ducks without him. But here's the thing: if Washington can somehow upset Oregon, and it's in Seattle, so it's not like they're headed for a drubbing in Eugene. Like playing at home in front of fans, they might be able to keep that game close. If Washington can steal that game, I think Oregon's the favorite going in. But if Washington can steal that game and get out of the first 8-9 games of the season with just 1 loss, then you have Tupuola Fetui returning in late November. What is expected to be a very good defense could become a great defense. That would be the dream scenario for the Washington Huskies. So we'll see if they can get by the Michigan game in week 2 in Ann Arbor, if they can somehow survive the Oregon game. And then if they get their best defensive player back late in the season, wow, that could be very interesting. Now, I don't think that'll happen, but that is the scenario which is out there for Washington to have a max out season.
Absolutely. All right, let's head to LA. The annual Clay Helton watch is underway. What's the date of the last game? Like late November, 1st of December. That's the guillotine, the day of guillotine execution day. What's the word out of LA? Clay Helton, does he have to win the South Division? Does he have to get to the title game to keep his job?
Yeah, so there was considerable news this past week in Los Angeles on that front, Jason. Mike Bohn, the USC athletic director, said 2021 was not make or break for Clay Helton. But here's the key. It's not as though he made a prepared statement saying that. He was asked about it by a reporter. Right. So, the reporter got to frame the question. The reporter asked, is 2021 make or break? Bohn said no. And so, of course, an athletic director is not just going to come out and say, well, this is the make or break season. You play politics, you show support in public for your head coach. So to that extent, that it doesn't mean a whole lot. But there were other remarks Bohn made which have USC fans concerned. He said USC was terrible in 2019, which coincidentally is when Bohn took over from Lynn Swann in the AD chair. So he's kind of tooting his own horn. Now, look how much I have improved the program. But nevertheless, Bohn talked about improvements USC has made under Clay Helton the last 2 years. And yes, the recruiting has been better the past 2 years, but who had USC in a bad place at the end of 2018 and the start of 2019? Clay Helton. It's the same guy. So that has USC fans concerned that Bohn thinks that Helton is, on the right track. That's not what USC fans want to hear. And so here's the deal. I think that Bohn's remarks, they don't mean that he's going to stand by Clay Helton no matter what. There was a political dimension to a good portion of what he said, but Bohn did seem to give a little bit more credit to Helton than he deserved. And so if we're trying to judge, is the AD trying to think about saving the coach or appeasing the fan base? If you're kind of doing like a needle here, the needle is slightly tipped toward he's trying to save the head coach. Like he seems to be on good terms with the head coach, and he might give him the benefit of the doubt. So I think if USC goes 10-2, Clay Helton is safe. Yes. I think that we're there right now. The real mystery is 9-3, 8-4. Well, I think if he goes 8-4, all right. If he goes 8-4,
and who he loses to.
Yeah, well, and if he goes 8-4, like one of those losses is going to be a non-conference loss to Notre Dame. So 8-4 could mean you go 6-3 in the Pac-12 South. And historically, you probably need to go 7-2 in the Pac-12 to win the South. But there have been occasions when 6-3 has been good enough, in a tiebreaker.
He better not. He won't make it at 8-4. He won't
If it's
make it at 8-4.
Well, if at 8-4, it probably means USC is going to lose tiebreakers. It probably does. And now, on the off chance that Utah and Arizona State are both finished 7-5, though, which would not be unheard of.
Right.
Maybe USC slips in the back door, and the Pac-12 South is awful. I mean, who knows? Like the pandemic season has given us so little basis for predicting what's actually going to happen, because that's really was kind of a throwaway season. Yep. Oregon won the Pac-12 and really played poorly most of the year. And remember, we had that bizarro Pac-12 title game with Oregon getting into the game because Washington had a COVID issue. Right. So it's really very scrambled. So, but anyway, if he goes 8-4, I think he's done. It's really 9-3. That's really kind of the Mendoza line. That's really the 50-50 scenario. And so it's probably going to depend on whether he gets into the Pac-12 championship game and then beats Oregon, or just wins that game, whoever the opponent is. That's really that is a 50-50 jump ball to me. So I think if you're a USC fan and you want Clay Helton gone, you're rooting for 4 losses. If you get 4 losses, he'll be out the door. But 9-3 and bone retaining Helton would be the disaster scenario, because you don't even get the 10-2. You don't get the really strong Pac-12 results. 9-3, that's the right on the fence, just enough to keep him around. Right. That would be the absolute nightmare for USC fans.
Let's go to the other side of LA. To me, I just keep waiting for Chip Kelly to put it together again, back to the glory days of his Oregon days. What is his 4th year at UCLA now, coming up on year 4? He's got a quarterback that's been there, played for a long time under his system. Has he recruited well enough for UCLA to be back being a factor again? Or is it just kind of another 7-5, 8-4 kind of year for UCLA?
Yeah, so this is where the Pac-12's 2020 season and all of its weirdness comes back into play, because UCLA looked great against a Cal team which was highly touted last year. Yep. That had COVID problems, was really disorganized. Cal last year had Bill Musgrave coming in as the new offensive coordinator. So there was a change at a very important spot, and Cal looked very disorganized. And you might remember Cal played UCLA on Sunday morning.
Right. That was
a rare Sunday morning game. Yep. And so Cal looked like a team that, had not woken up, didn't get the alarm clock early enough. So, but does UCLA's great performance in that game mean that the Bruins are, headed in the right direction? It's hard to say. And then UCLA's other really good performance last year was against Arizona State. UCLA physically dominated Arizona State in Tempe, but Arizona State had its COVID problems. Arizona State did not play for 3 weeks. And so the Sun Devils were rusty. They were out of rhythm. They hadn't practiced. And they probably committed pandemic recruiting violations in the days leading up to that game. But anyway, the point is Arizona State was not in any kind of rhythm. UCLA definitely caught Arizona State at the right time. So again, you ask, is that a reflection on UCLA and the Bruins being headed in the right direction, or was that more of a reflection of Arizona State being a total mess during the pandemic? So it's really hard to figure which way it's going to go for UCLA this year. But, we look at Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the quarterback that you mentioned. He has plenty of experience, definitely a dynamic dual threat playmaker, can make plays with his legs. But really, what's going to tell the tale for UCLA? The defense. And UCLA got a big lead against USC late last season and blew it in the second half. Right. Just a collapse in the fourth quarter. So it's really going to be the defense. We look at the offense. We look at Chip Kelly. We remember what he did at Oregon. But it's the defense that's going to determine what UCLA has. And, I don't have a strong opinion, but I would say that, the burden of proof is on UCLA to show it can play elite defense over the course of 12 games. And we'll see what it does against LSU in week 1. UCLA is one of the few teams that plays in week 0 against Hawaii. Gotcha. So it gets a game under its belt, and then it hosts LSU on Labor Day weekend in week 1. And if it can pull the upset there, well, that's the springboard for the Bruins. If they can cross that hurdle, they can dare to dream bigger. But if LSU comes in and mows them down, it's going to be same old, and Chip's going to be on the hot seat.
Is he recruiting well out there? Is he pretty fairly competitive with the USCs and the Oregons on the recruiting trail?
Not really. I mean, Oregon and USC are the only two Pac-12 programs that are in the national top 25 in recruiting. So right. Chip Kelly is not making what I would view as a splash. Now, I mean, Washington is really taking it on the chin in recruiting, and Husky fans in Seattle, they're really worried that everything's cratering under Jimmy Lake. But Chip Kelly is not really moving the needle the way UCLA fans hoped he would on the recruiting trail.
I got you. What's the deal with David Shaw at Stanford? Is he getting stale at Stanford? I mean, he's been there a long time. He's resisted opportunities to go elsewhere. Is that something where he just does? To me, it just feels like he might be in line just to make a move, just to be in a different environment. I know they're doing okay at Stanford, but it seems like he's wasting the prime of his coaching career, where he could be at a big job, either an SEC type job or maybe even potentially an NFL job. What is your thoughts on Shaw at Stanford?
Well, one of the interesting things about this past summer in the Pac-12 is that when the reports of alleged recruiting violations emerged at Arizona State, who was the one Pac-12 coach who really came out with a fierce, forceful statement condemning the Sun Devils and Herm Edwards? It was David Shaw. So, there is definitely a sense of pride David Shaw has in being at Stanford, this citadel of academic excellence, like being able to win while having these high academic standards. That's something that really matters to David Shaw. So right now, it seems as though he likes being there. That's where he wants to be. He wants to revive the program after, the post-Christian McCaffrey lull the past several years. It isn't what it once was. I think Shaw, at least right now, seems pretty invested in that. Now, if he has a terrible 2021, that might change his mind. But I would say he's definitely going to coach Stanford in 2022, and that might be when he considers a look at a different job. So, and Stanford's a real mystery, and it's been interesting to notice that in terms of the over/under win totals, Stanford's over/under win total at a lot of sports books is 4.
Wow,
and that means Stanford's going to lose to Oregon State. That means Stanford's going to lose to Washington State. That's not happening.
I don't think so.
It usually doesn't. I mean, Washington State's in a really bad spot. Washington State's hemorrhaged depth under Nick Rolovich. And Oregon State, people are noticed that Oregon State beat Oregon last year. That was a lot more about where Oregon was than where Oregon State was. And so Oregon State, Jonathan Smith shows signs of being a good coach, but we need to see like a 7-5 season from Oregon State to give the Beavers that level of respect. So the idea that Stanford's going to be 4-8, I'm not seeing. I'm thinking 6-6, maybe 7-5, which is definitely not where the program expects to be. It's not where David Shaw expects to be, but they'll get to a bowl game.
Right.
And so, with David Shaw, what really made the difference for him, when he took over from Jim Harbaugh, partly it was having Andrew Luck at the very beginning. That obviously helped. But then when Luck left 2012, 13, 14, 15, Stanford's regularly had great running backs, not just Christian McCaffrey, but then Bryce Love in 2017. That's been a constant. But the defense had monsters in 2012, 2013, that period when Stanford was regularly making the Rose Bowl.
Yes.
I mean, they were able to shut down Chip Kelly's Oregon offenses.
Right.
That's what's not there at Stanford anymore. That bone-crushing, just shut you down defense. That's where Stanford.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where Stanford is lacking. So Shaw has to find a way to build that back. Now, if he can, I mean, look, he's shown that he can win in modern times with a man ball philosophy, but until he gets some real freaks on defense to supplement the running backs that he's always able to develop at Stanford.
Tight ends, they're always good at
missing piece there.
Yeah, always good at tight end, always pretty good on the offensive line. He likes to play that power I formation football more than the spread. Old school.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so he needs a nasty defense. I mean, you think about Oklahoma. Oklahoma went through a lull precisely because it lost that edge with pass rushing. I mean, you think about the great Oklahoma teams from various eras, not just the Tony Casillas teams of the mid 1980s, but the teams around the early 2000s. They had a nasty defense. Like they won some slugfests against Texas, not the 50 to 45 games we've seen in recent years, but like with the Roy Williams, Teddy Lehman, they would beat Texas 12-0. They beat Texas 14-3. And, so Oklahoma lost its way for several years late in the Bob Stoops era, when that defense and the pass rush, ceased to be authoritative. So that's what Alex Grinch has been able to develop back at Oklahoma. That's why you're seeing Oklahoma ranked in the top 2 and being thought of as a team that's going to finally clear that playoff semifinal hurdle and get to the national title game. So I illustrate that example just to tie back to Stanford. Stanford lost that kind of bite on defense, much as Oklahoma did. If the revival is going to happen at Stanford, that's where it's going to come from.
And they're going to win they're going to be in a lot of close games. They're not going to get blown out a lot. They're going to be in a lot of, defensive.
A lot like Arizona State.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. That's just the style he likes to play and tries to win the game in the fourth quarter kind of strategy. All right.
100%.
Yeah. So you're listening to the Powers on Sports podcast. We're chatting with Matt Zemek about all things Pac-12. Matt's the editor for Trojan Wire, part of the USA Today network of online platforms. Couple sleeper teams. To me, one of the best coaches in the country that gets undervalued every year and gets the most out of his kids is Whittingham at Utah. What a job he does developing kids at Utah, year after year, and they're always competitive. Your thoughts on Utah, and give me a sleeper team in the conference that may not win the conference, but that's going to be a pain in the neck to everybody.
So let me start with that sleeper team first. I think it's Cal, and that doesn't mean I'm sold on Cal. I'm not, but I just see the door being open in the Pac-12 North in terms of I can see Oregon's quarterback situation imploding, in which case the Ducks could be an 8-4 team, and I can see Washington's offense imploding. I mean, Washington has not recruited well, especially not at wide receiver. Dylan Morris, we need to see him play well. And if Washington gets kicked around by Michigan early in the season in week 2, we could see the Huskies stumble through their season. And again, missing Tupuola Fetui, that's probably going to cost them at least a game or 2 at some point. So let's say Oregon and Washington, I mean, I wouldn't expect it, but it's well within the realm of possibility that Oregon and Washington both finish 8-4. And if that happens, who's to say Cal can't be 8-4? So it's not a matter of Cal being so good that it's going to rise up the charts. It's more going to be about Oregon and Washington falling to the level where Cal might be able to steal a weak Pac-12 North. Now, the Pac-12 North has won 9 of the 10 Pac-12 championship games. It has been the better division in the Pac-12 over the past decade, but maybe this is the year in which the Pac-12 North is terrible. So Cal's a sleeper team in that sense. Veteran quarterback Chase Garbers, Wilcox, is an extremely good defensive coach. He's frustrated Oregon's offense each of the last 2 seasons, and he's won 2 straight against Washington. So Cal winning the North, not likely at all. No one's saying that. Possible?
Pain in the neck.
Absolutely.
And pain in the neck.
And so let's now go to Utah. So Kyle Whittingham. Now I'm of the opinion that he's a very good coach. No one disputes that, but he hasn't won a Pac-12 title yet, and he's been there a long time. And he's had some really good defenses. He's had some great opportunities to win the conference. This year the big drama for Utah is Utah has never won in the Los Angeles Coliseum, not once. And USC's been, not that great over the past decade, since Pete Carroll left. So Utah and Whittingham, they need to go into the LA Coliseum and win. Now, first of all, if Utah wins at USC, it's probably winning the Pac-12 South and making the Pac-12 championship game. But it's more than that. It's about, if you really view yourself as an elite program, you're going to knock this door down. You're going to get past this obstacle, trying to beat Alabama in the SEC West or Florida trying to beat Georgia. Florida knocked that door down last year after Dan Mullen whiffed several times. So Utah and Whittingham need to knock that door down in Los Angeles against the Trojans. That would change perceptions for me and other people who've seen Utah get really close, but then it's usually the quarterback position. It's usually the offense that stumbles. Like in the 2018 Pac-12 championship game, scored just 3 points against Washington, and Washington's only touchdown was a pick six. So it was essentially a 3-3 game. I mean, that's the history of Utah the past decade under Whittingham. Great defense, but the offense just can't get over the hump in really meaningful moments. So I think, Whittingham, I respect him. And yeah, like he's done this in Salt Lake City. He hasn't done this in a big media market.
I think what he does
that, but he really has to get past some of these hurdles that he just hasn't been able to clear since that 2008 team with Brian Johnson, the one that crushed Alabama in the Sugar Bowl.
Remember, and my point on Whittingham is this guy's not getting 4- and 5-star recruits. He is developing 2- and 3-star guys. And he's getting the most out of these kids, and for them to be pushing USC, Oregon every year and being super competitive in Salt Lake City, Utah, that's a hell of a feat.
It sure is. And and I will say in his defense and on his behalf that, hey, he's won 2 of the last 3 Pac-12 Souths. Last year was kind of a throwaway season. Something like he won the division back to back. So he's definitely. He has shown signs of growth and improvement over the past few years. And I would also say about this year's team, Charlie Brewer, he almost led Baylor to the college football playoff in 2019. So I think that's a great transfer addition. He's a tough quarterback. So he's the kind of guy who, if Utah can get to the Pac-12 title game, I don't expect Charlie Brewer to fold under pressure the way Utah's other quarterbacks have done. So I'm optimistic on the Utes this year, but my optimism is really more because Clay Helton and Herm Edwards are the coaches that Whittingham is going against. So there's three coaches that I'm skeptical of to varying degrees, but obviously I'm a lot more skeptical of Helton and Edwards than I am of Whittingham. But I do think that Charlie Brewer is going to be a difference maker for Utah this season.
All right, I got 2 more and get you out of here. Give me a couple of venues that are pretty cool venues to watch a game at that maybe people around the country wouldn't see. Obviously, we know about Oregon and Autzen. Give me a venue or 2 that are kind of under the radar that are pretty cool places to watch a good game.
Okay, well, Husky Stadium's not under the radar, but the lakeside tailgating, the majestic view, gotta mention that. But the thing about the Pac-12, the stadiums generally are intimate. None of the stadiums other than the LA Coliseum are these 80 or 90,000 seat stadiums, which are commonplace in the SEC and Big Ten. Most of them are relatively intimate. You think about it, like Berkeley, Strawberry Canyon, the Memorial Stadium nestled into those cliffs there, and you have the Rose Bowl, of course, in the shadows of the San Gabriel Mountains.
I remember back in the day when Colorado was good. Folsom Field was a pretty cool environment when they were really good.
Well, but it's also an intimate stadium. I don't think that's much more than 55,000 capacity. So Reser Stadium, in Corvallis, just in those open fields of Oregon. I've driven up
a snowy night in Pullman.
Times.
A snowy night in Pullman is always a pretty cool watch on TV, at least on when you see it on TV.
Yeah, so Martin Stadium up in Pullman is 35,000. So there's a common thread among many Pac-12 stadiums that they're not huge behemoths. They're nestled into these cozy enclaves. So the conference has a lot of charm that way, and that actually most of the stadiums are not huge. They go for intimacy. So you're close to the field, you're in a localized environment. It's not kind of swallowed up in a big urban sprawl. So there's lots of local color and charm when you go to the stadiums. Now you don't have the electricity of the SEC, but you definitely get an intimate game day experience whenever you go to a Pac-12 stadium.
You got it. All right, it's prediction time. Who do you like coming out of the North and the South, and who do you think is going to be the conference champion? And do you think they're going to make the playoff?
Yeah. So, Washington's offensive system, I think, is just going to be such a drag on the Huskies that Oregon will go up to Seattle and beat the Huskies. Oregon should beat the Huskies based on the full resources of each program. I don't think Dylan Morris is good enough at quarterback to offset, Oregon's quarterback woes. I don't think he's going to be able to transcend that. And so it's going to be an ugly defensive game. And I think Oregon has the better defense because of Thibodeau being on the field and Tupa Olafetui not being on the field. So Oregon in the north, and then I think Utah in the south. And I think Utah will, in fact, knock that door down against USC. It's just impossible to trust Clay Helton. Now, that having been said, there is a possibility that, Keaton Slovis is just, the bionic man this year. He does whatever he wants. He slings it around the yard so well that that Clay Helton's presence doesn't matter. And it also has to be said that USC does look better on defense under coordinator Todd Orlando. He replaced a bad defensive coordinator named Clancy Pendergast a couple years ago. Right. Now, obviously a big question mark is, did the pandemic mean USC's defense played well last year, but it was a pandemic season. So was that a product of Pac-12 offenses being disorganized because they didn't have an off season in which to gain continuity and rhythm? But it really does seem that Todd Orlando at USC has made the Trojans defense legitimately stronger, tougher, given them better stamina. He's sharpened their instincts. So that could be a reason to pick USC, not only to win the South, but to win the whole Pac-12. But my Clay Helton skepticism is just too deeply entrenched for that. So I do like Utah to win in Los Angeles and win the South. And then in the Pac-12 title game, it's just you have 10 years of history to look at, Jason, and you also have that 2019 Utah-Oregon Pac-12 title game to look at. Until Utah gets across the threshold, you got to pick the Pac-12 North, and you got to pick against Utah in a Pac-12 championship game. Now, hopefully it won't be the 10-3 game against Washington in 2018, but nevertheless, Utah has the burden of proof. Utah has to show that it can beat the Pac-12 North champion in the conference title game. And then, no, I don't think Oregon is going to make the college football playoff. I think the Pac-12 will be locked out. I think the Pac-12 champion will have at least 2 losses. And we say it out here in the West every year. The Pac-12 champion, in order to be in the mix for the playoff, has to go 12-1. And you can't lose that second game. And I don't see any team being, that truly elite standout team to get to 12-1. The fact that Oregon is very likely to lose at Ohio State in week 2 on September 11, that Oregon probably needs that game to get to the playoff.
Yes.
As Pac-12 champion, not very likely. Washington similarly has to win that game at Michigan in week 2 to get to the playoff. And that's a 50-50 game for me. But I don't think the Huskies offense is consistent enough. And Utah, might win in LA against USC, but then might lose to Arizona State. We'll have other tough games on its schedule. Utah and Oregon play each other, so one of those 2 teams is going to lose there. Mm-hmm. So it just doesn't look like the Pac-12 is going to get a playoff team, which kind of brings us back full circle, Jason, to the beginning of the conversation. They need that 12-team playoff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, absolutely. No, there's no doubt about it. Well, Matt, great job. Continued success with USC, the Trojan Wire. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media and where they can find your coverage of USC football.
Yeah, so on trojanswire.usatoday.com. You can find me on Twitter at Matt Zemek, Cemek. I do have a Patreon site. I recently did a Cal Golden Bears podcast at my Patreon site, and I don't paywall my Patreon content. So if you just, I want everybody to enjoy it and partake of it. And if you like my work, hey, throw a few bucks in the tip jar. I'm not expecting, large donations, but, if you throw in $5, that would really help. I just like, the work to be appreciated. Before we close this broadcast, Jason, I just want to say on the air, really enjoyed your Bobby Bowden retrospective.
Appreciate that.
Great way to honor the coach, the passion, the love, and the extent to which Bobby Bowden touched your life and the lives of the people you had on the show. Really enjoyed it. Really appreciate it. God bless you.
I appreciate it. I was going to mention one more thing. I know Terry Donahue, the UCLA coach, just passed away recently. Did you have any experiences with him or over the years at all? I mean, I know he was a big time coach out in UCLA in the Pac-10 for many, many years.
Well, as a young boy, the first Rose Bowl I ever watched as a 6-year-old was 1982. The second one was 1983. And that was when Terry Donahue began that run of 3 Rose Bowl championships in 4 years at UCLA. And you stop and think, UCLA hasn't won the Pac-10, now the Pac-12, since 1998. The Bob Toledo, Cade McNown team, which came within an eyelash of playing in the first BCS championship game against Tennessee, lost that heartbreaker to Miami. So UCLA hasn't done jack squat in 23 years. Terry Donahue had UCLA regularly in the top 10, regularly playing New Year's Day bowl games. He was a badass.
Yeah, he was. He brought Troy Aikman to UCLA from Oklahoma. He was an unbelievable West Coast. I mean, Pac-10 coach, man. He was the dean of the Pac-10 for many, many years in the 80s and early 90s.
It's kind of remarkable to know that he is the winningest Pac-12 coach ever by, I believe by 1 game over Don James. But what that shows is that, longevity has been hard to come by. And you think about it, like John McKay, I think in many ways, to me, is like the greatest Pac-10 coach ever. I mean, now technically he never coached in the Pac-10 because the Pac-10 didn't come into existence until 1978 when Arizona State joined. But of the schools that have current Pac-12 membership, I would say John McKay is the best ever, but he just lasted 16 years. There's no Pac-10, 12, or formerly back in the 70s, Pac-8 coach who became like the Joe Paterno of the West, who stayed like 25, 30 years, like Bobby Bowden did at Florida State. There's no Pac-10, Pac-12 coach who did that. Donahue, when he retired, I believe, at age 51. Young. He got out of the profession very early. And like Dean Smith at North Carolina, he said years later he regretted that he retired that early. But so it's remarkable that Donahue accomplished all he did in a relatively shorter period of time, retiring at 51, before going to the CBS broadcast booth and then to the 49ers front office and those other pursuits. So it's just as striking that there's been no Bobby Bowden of the West, at least in recent memory, at least in the past 50, 60 years or so. So that's a striking part of, reflecting on Terry Donahue's career and legacy at UCLA. Yeah,
no doubt. He was a great coach out there and really put West Coast football on the map, outside obviously USC, but he made LA a hotbed for football with USC and UCLA.
What he did was, USC had just come off the John Robinson years where, won the national title in 78, was number 2 in 79. Marcus Allen won the 81 Heisman Trophy. I mean, USC was still USC at the height of its powers, and Donahue was able to muscle in there and make LA a 2-city football town. And really with UCLA under Donahue and USC and then Don James at Washington, he had 3 really formidable Pac-10 programs in the 1980s. And that gave the league depth, and it also boosted the conference's reputation going forward heading into the 1990s.
Absolutely. Well, great work, Matt. Keep it up. And we will definitely check in at some point here early in the college football season to get some thoughts, man. So have a great week and appreciate the insight.
Jason, we have week 0 coming up. I know that some people might not think of Nebraska versus Illinois as real college football, but it's a Big Ten game that counts. So the season is upon us. I hope you have a really fun season on your show.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Matt. Have a great week, man.
You too. Thank you.